Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. It is season number 3, and joining me again is Capping with Candace. Candace, this week we're going to take a look at the Sham Stakes and the San Pasquale. But let's take a look back and recap from last week. The two big winners on the card, Flexibility and Awesome Speed in the Jerome Handicap and the Mucho Macho Man Stakes. Any thoughts on those two races?
I think Flexibility probably won the better race, and that's kind of seemed what we both agreed when we first discussed it. However you want to take that for Mohaymen, I think is maybe what's left up to a little bit of interpretation. I know we'll talk about that a little bit later on in this episode, but I actually really liked Awesome Speed, and I think he's a horse that people aren't really giving a lot of credit to. I don't know how far he wants to go, but I just like that he really overcame adversity. When he missed the start, that he looked extremely uncomfortable throughout in the running and still won it fairly easily. So just his temperament, his attitude, the way he was able to overcome trouble. Whether or not he's a Derby horse, I don't know, but I think he's a horse who's going to win some nice races.
Yeah, I thought he did what he needed to do, and you're right, he overcame a little bit of adversity. And I think the runner-up actually ran a good race, and some people are kind of getting going by margin of victory. And when the runner-up runs a good race, that margin of victory isn't going to be that great. Flexibility, I thought, did what he needed to do. I was right, and I thought that he would come off the pace. I didn't really anticipate 3 horses going on a suicide mission on the front end. But unless he completely couldn't pass a horse, whoever sat in that 4th spot was going to benefit from a 3-horse duel. Vorticity held on well. And again, I think you can't throw them all out, but every time you see a high speed number from Parks, you really have to take a second. I mean, it just seems that way.
It does seem that way these days, and I'm glad he brought margin of victory because it is something that, especially for the 3-year-old teams, the Derby people tend to latch onto. And I think sometimes what's forgotten in that is oftentimes when you have a race that's won by a wide margin of victory, a lot of times that's a sign that it was a bad race, that it's not going to end up being a formful race. It takes a special horse to win a race by a lot over a race that ends up holding true to form. And unless you think you have an American Pharoah in this crop, I wouldn't toss those races that have smaller margins of victories because sometimes those end up being the stronger races overall.
Looks like Flexibility is going to go next in the Withers, and then they're still deciding on Awesome Speed, either swale or possibly just wait for the Fountain of Youth.
Yes.
This week we got the Sham Stakes as our 3-year-old prep, and this race has been won by some good horses in the past, including Golden Sense. This year's field, though, has a little bit of everything. It's got some turfers, it's got some nice maiden winners, and then it's even got a maiden still in the race, but it drew a full field, and I think the betting's going to be pretty wide open in this one, not necessarily like last week where we had a 3-5 and a 6-5.
Yeah, and if you want another wrench thrown into it, it looks like it has a big dark rain cloud following it too, with all the weather they've had lately in Southern California. I know people are saying that, they're kind of anticipating that weather's going to come into play, and you might have a muddy or a sloppy surface for this sort of a race. I'll start off with the horse, I guess, that I didn't know what to do with. And for me, that was Collected. Bob Baffert, his barn has been completely out of form as of late. Collected comes here never having ran on the dirt. But with that pedigree, you'd think that he should be able to. He's by City Zip. He's had a Johannesburg mare named Helena Bay. She won over the dirt. His full siblings won over the dirt. Johannesburg won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. No reason this horse shouldn't run over dirt except that Baffert started it on the turf, which makes you think that he didn't think it could go over the dirt, just knowing his general style. When a horse has potential to run over dirt, that's usually where they go in the first place with him. He doesn't usually get tricky with surfaces, so this is a little bit of a weird spot. It's a horse that I'm not using because there are too many negatives with how his barn is going, and the fact that it did start on the turf, but that's a tricky horse, and probably the one horse in this race that I kind of really don't know what to do with in there, so I'm going to risk it and hope that I can get through unscathed. I think the horse is going to take a lot of money in here is dressed in Hermes. We saw this horse in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf run 5th, a very nice 5th, considering how fast they went in those middle sectionals of that race, which led Hit a Bomb to come from the back. This is a horse who, it ran over the dirt in its maiden race at Del Mar, finished fourth behind Exaggerator. Exaggerator's gone to do good things. Made a nice middle move in there. I think the potential for dirt is there. I just think this horse is going to get overbet, so I would kind of be staying away from there. I think there's a couple in here that have maybe a little bit more potential at this point. Maybe haven't ran as quite as many times as Dress and Ermay has. The horse in here who I'm going to take a swing with is Laoban. You said the maiden. I'm going with the maiden. This is by Uncle Mo out of Speightstown. Mare named Chattertown. This is a horse who I certainly would think, should you get the off track, this is one who I think, just at least pedigree-wise, would absolutely benefit from that sort of a scenario. Quite a lot in this pedigree, as far as slop, mud influences go. And that last race, I went back and watched it, that was nice. I mean, I know it's Los Al, and people want to kind of toss those races, but out there, dueling on the front end, to hang on the way that that horse did, that was really nice. I mean, that's, the kind of qualities I'll take going forward, just because it shows the horse has inherent talent. The horse also has speed, so, in a race that does have several turf runners who aren't used to maybe going at as quick of tempos as the dirt runners, and if you get the off-tracks often play kindly towards the speedsters. So I'm looking at Laoban as my horse to upset the horses who've already run here, even more so if you get the off-track. The only other one I'd give a nod to, if you're looking for something underneath, again, this would be an off-track play, but that'd be Semper Fortis, Distorted Humor, out of an Unbridled Songmare, another horse who I think could potentially freak over the off-track. He'd need it, I think, to beat some of these. He needs an upgrade as far as speed figures go to beat some of these, but possibly could really take to that sort of surface. So I'm going Laoban on top, but don't forget Semper Fortis in there.
Yeah, three potential horses that could go for the lead are Collected, and then Laoban, and I'm not so sure about Fawn Money. I think just at this class level, he may not have as much raw speed as some of the others. Semper Fortis had a very interesting debut race. I thought it was probably one of the top 2 or 3 maiden races of the year. Problem is Blame It on the Law and him just gutted themselves, and I really thought, I think Doug O'Neill even thought it gutted him, because I still can't believe nobody claimed that horse for 62.5 when they dropped him in for a tag.
Yeah.
He's a half-brother to, maybe even a half-brother to Seize the Day and Carpe Diem, and then a half-brother to another stakes winner at Keeneland. So the fact that he's won a couple in a row, and the fact that he's rated a little bit, maybe he just gutted himself, and now he's kind of righted the ship. They paid a lot of money for him. He's not my top pick, but I do think some people maybe have overreacted, and you could have had him for 62.5, and he was purchased for 500K, so that was a little unusual.
Well, what do you think of him with the weather too? Do you think, like I do, that he would benefit from
I think he moves. I like him more if it is sloppy.
Yeah.
I do like the city zips in the slop. But you're right. Everything else kind of points negative in that direction. He entered 2 horses. The horse ran on the turf twice. City Zip is probably more turf, although he paid 170 for it. So at one point he thought it could be a dirter, because he doesn't go looking for turfers. He goes looking for dirters. So Collected, I think, could be kind of a key to the pace. The 2 turfers, I think you're right. I think the betting on Dresden Hermes is going to be a little over the top, especially with Mike Smith. So I'm going to take a shot with the rail horse here. I really like this Rare Candy horse. Twirling Candy was a horse that I really, from a conformational standpoint, and ran some huge races. I think some people forget that, he just ran some tremendous speed figures, had a lightly raced career. And, stud fee kind of went up. He's got some Argentinian influence in him, so that usually means they like to slop a little bit. And Fusiechi Pegasus is all dirt. And I'm just wondering, he's got the class. He's ran in 3 stakes races. And really, finishing 7 lengths behind Nyquist and Swipe, maybe that's only 3-4 lengths against this group, but I think he might be 15-1. I just like the rail and Joe Talamo. He will need some pace, but I do think this is a dirt pedigree, and maybe this is just a horse that they were looking for longer races and not necessarily the turf. I guess I'd rather have him at 10-1 than Semper Fortis at maybe 4-1, and I definitely don't like Let's Meet in Rio. I wasn't a big fan of that maiden win.
No, me neither with Let's Meet in Rio. Rare Candy, I see it, like you say, had a solid run in the front runner. I think that he benefited from the pace scenario in there, but still ran really well. And I agree with you on the twirling candies. I know they've gotten a lot of, looks overseas in Ireland and stuff. They've in the sales ring, they've done very well over there, by I think everybody's standards for him. So he's already had a couple of good runners, and I think this is another one of those in Rare Candy. You're certainly going to get a price with him, so I think that's one thing we're guaranteed of. You like Rare Candy, I like Lauban. I think we're going to get square odds on both unless somebody knows something we don't know right now on Wednesday evening.
Yeah, unless we get a bunch of scratches, I think, there'll be a nice odds on board because I don't think I mean, even Dresden Hermes isn't going to be like a 6-5 or 7-5. That's a
No.
5-2 shot type thing.
And with so many turf horses in though, I wonder if weather comes into play. I wonder if we don't see nearly as many scratches either. Sometimes, you'll see turf horses actually take really well to these sort of sloppy surfaces. So I'd anticipate maybe not as many scratches as you might think if rain comes into play.
Overall, I think it matches up equally well to the Jerome and possibly a little stronger quality than the Mucho Macho Man. So I think the winner or a couple horses could move on to the Lewis Stakes. So that's race 6, and then we're going to go to race 8 now, the San Pasqual, which is for older horses. And this features the return of California Chrome, and I think it's going to at least bring some excitement to the social media world.
It certainly will. I think everyone's glad to see him back after the issues that he had last year. And, for all the chatter people want to give about, oh, these horses are retired too soon, nobody wants to race them. Well, here you go. Probably would have been a lot easier for them and certainly less risk, I would think, to have just shelved them after last year. But they're coming back, doing kind of the sporting thing and seeing what they can do with them. They said they have 2 goals this year, Dubai World Cup and the Breeders' Cup Classic. So very good to see him back for his first step, I guess, first step in his first form cycle of the season. Plan is to run him here, then run him in the Maktoum Challenge Round 3 in Dubai, which will be his final prep for the Dubai World Cup. The big question for him is if weather comes into play. Greg, is California Chrome going to take to the slop?
2 years ago on our debut season of Down to the Wire, I always speculated he would be good in the slop.
Yes.
He's never actually ran on it, but I do think there are some slop influences in this pedigree, especially Pulpit.
Yes.
AP Indy adds a lot, and then a lot of people may not realize it, but Not for Love, the broodmare sire, had a lot of slop winners in the Maryland Laurel circuit. So there is some slop connections here, and his workout was pretty fantastic last week. That's finally the first workout in over a year where you could say, you know what, he actually looks like he's going to put in a 3-year-old type effort. So I am going with California Chrome, and I do think Opportunity is the most likely exacta. And I think he's got some slop pedigree too, definitely with that unaccounted for on the female side. So I think it could be a straight exacta. Maybe you can turn it into a trifecta and make a few dollars.
I'm with you on California Chrome. I think that slop isn't going to be an issue. I mean, surface hasn't seemed to be much of an issue with him to begin with. He just kind of runs over whatever you give him. And his running style, he makes his own luck in races, which when he's his best is what's so tough about him and why he wins so often. Horses who can go forward, sit there and pounce and, win. Can you imagine, his potent turn of foot that he has on his best days coming off that turn in the slop? I mean, that's just not something that I think horses can keep up with unless they really, really handle the surface. So I'm going to pick him here as well. I agree that work was fantastic. It was the first work in a long time where he's looked very, completely healthy to me. I think there was a while in there where he had some works that, it looked like maybe he was having back problems. He just looked a little bit unbalanced in his movement, like he was favoring one side a little more than the other. Didn't look like that at all here. So glad to see him back. Glad to see him, in tip-top shape. A mile and 16th for him is fine. I think in reality, and this is what I've always said, California Chrome, yes, he won the Kentucky Derby, but California Chrome, I think, is most effective over 9 furlongs. So this 8.5 isn't so far off that in a distance that he can win over no problem. Opportunity, if it's sloppy, I think is the biggest competitor. We've seen him run over a wet track before when he beat Tapiture back in the day. over in the Rebel Stakes. He ran extremely well over. I don't think it was sloppy, but it certainly was still wet that day, and he ran very well. And I mean, it takes something to beat Tapiture over a wet track, because Tapiture loves those wet tracks too. So Opportunity would love the surface if he gets some rain. My worry with Opportunity is I'm starting to wonder if he's a little bit tripless. I think maybe he's best over 9 furlongs as well, but it's almost like he needs it. I think anything shorter these days is a little bit too short for him. Anything longer these days is maybe a little bit too long for him, unless he gets a crazy pace scenario like they got in the Gold Cup. But yeah, I'm wondering if he's either just a little bit tough to win with, or if he's tripless. But he'll go close, he always does, but he just seems to always take money. The way that barn's going out of form, I couldn't pick him to win, but you certainly have to use him underneath. But I mean, he has all the ability to win here. I couldn't, knowing he's going to be a short price, even with Chrome in there. The rest of these, I can't even. I mean, just pace-wise, style-wise, this could be just a weird race where you could have half the horses out of touch in the beginning. Like, there's just no, aside from Chrome, and aside from Mystery Train, who we can't ever rely on what he's going to do, there isn't a ton of speed here. I mean, Alpha Bird has shown speed a time or two, but I'm not sure if he has Chrome speed.
Yeah, I think just from the rail, he'll probably get sent a little bit, though.
Yeah. I wonder if he's one of those who'll go forward, and then the second someone comes up with him, he just kind of fades back. I mean, there isn't a lot here. I mean, it's not a bad race. I think just having Chrome and Opportunity alone, it's not a bad race, but there isn't much besides the two of them in this race.
Well, it does set him up for Dubai. It sets Opportunity up if he wants another prep or to train up to the big cap. I think, they're going to run in some big races. And, yeah, he's another horse that doesn't win, but he makes his share of dollars as well. And, I still think there's probably a race that he's going to overachieve in and win this year when you don't kind of expect him.
Yes.
That type of horse, that's when they do it. He's going to run 8 times.
The problem is that he's always short, though. So, we won't expect it, but he wins at 4-1. Like, I think I could just risk a horse knowing that that's always the case. I mean, last year, since in his latest cycle, so since June 13th, since the Stephen Foster, he ran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. The highest odds he went off at was 9-2. I mean, I'm fine risking a horse like that.
Yeah, on your win tickets. But I do think, sometimes, I think you really have to play a try in this race, and maybe you can turn, if you're going to play the race,
yes,
you ain't going to play Chrome at $2.40.
No.
You probably ain't going to play the $2 exacta, but maybe you can turn it into a $7 try and play and try to get 5-2 on your money.
Maybe just Chrome Opportunity straight, and then throw something underneath. I mean, I wouldn't. He might be completely outclassed here, but like a Point Piper, I could see if it's sloppy, getting up into third, come from off the pace. Giant's Causeway out of a Sadler's Wells mare, I can see, it should be fine. The Giant's Causeway seem to love these kind of sort of sloppy surfaces. Hollander for horses are going well. He would be one maybe I would throw underneath for third. But yeah, there isn't a lot.
Well, the Sham Stakes is this week. Next week, we're going to take a look way down yonder in the bayou at the Lecomte Stakes. But let's go off the track this week. We've got a couple of topics involving the 3-year-old scene. First one, what do you want to talk about?
For me, I wanted to talk about, we look at this calendar to the Kentucky Derby, this road to the Triple Crown, they call it, and there's kind of phases. We have the first round of the preps that are kind of starting up right around now, then the second round, and then the third. In this first round of preps, not talking a Derby horse, but just for these races, this first round, do you more look towards horses who are new, fresh, maybe they've run once or twice, unexposed types, or are you looking for the horses who have a very strong juvenile basis, maybe they've run 6, 7, 8 times, maybe not a Derby horse, but the horses who have a little bit more experience under their belt?
Well, what I do is a flow chart. I'm a big believer in the flow chart of form. I don't really care how many races they have, but like last week you had Mohaymen had beat Flexibility twice. Flexibility then came out and beat his opponents. You have a horse like Vorticity, who I thought had ran a nice race in beating Wheels Up Now. And Wheels Up Now had lost to Destin, who ran in a maiden special weight race. So I always just kind of line up my first tier of horses, and you got like Nyquist and some of these other ones. So it's not so much how many races they've ran, but I just kind of do the old A beat B, B beat C. And unless there's things like known track biases, or I got a different speed figure or something like that, I kind of just go with the form. And I really think it's the horses that run off the screen. That's when you got to be prepared to see if they can step up in those middle preps.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. I think for me, it is interesting how sometimes you see it change. Like for me at this time of the year, I often find myself siding with some of the horses who've ran more often, who had that juvenile basis underneath them, and who are a little more experienced because they tend to be at the higher levels right now. It's sort of in that middle, maybe around Fountain of Youth time, that you start seeing some of these horses who've ran once or twice, who are very unexposed, who then I find myself shifting towards because I think they have more improvement left in them. So for me, right, at this time of the year, I find myself leaning towards the horses who've already proven themselves to me, and then later on I'm looking for the ones who have improvement left in them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I try to stick with form, and then also I'm a big believer in field size, especially with some of these preps. So, for example, Dresden Hermes, he's faced a 12-horse field, a 14-horse field, a 10-horse field. I prefer runners and second-place finishers out of big fields than somebody who won a 5-horse field like maybe Semper Fortis.
No, that I completely agree with. The big fields for these young horses, that's a big deal.
The next topic, last week we talked about Nyquist, and we kind of debated. We said, you know what, he may not win the Derby, but he's probably a little better than what I think the expert handicappers are giving him credit for. Today, the Eclipse Award finalists were announced, and for the 2-year-old division, now turned 3, the top 3 finalists were Air Force, Nyquist, and Mohaymen. And we haven't really talked about Mohaymen yet. Of course, he won the Nashua, and then he won the Remsen, and he won a maiden race. So he's 3 for 3. He'll probably finish second in the Eclipse Award, and he's pointing for the Holy Bull right now at the end of the month.
Yeah, I mean, he's a horse that we haven't talked a ton about, except for in reference, I suppose, to our race last week with Flexibility, but he's been talked about a lot in his own right. Tap It, half sibling to New Year's Day, I believe, with Shadwell. So you have everything there from the connections, the breeding standpoint, top class in that respect. Like you say, it's undefeated. Won the Nashua Remsen double, which certainly isn't easy to do. I mean, I suppose with him, the big thing is that people are going to be looking, what do they do with him? I know he's in Palm Meadows, so I know they're going to at least try him in Florida at the start. I wonder, if he's going to stay there, or if he'll end up coming back up to New York, like ended up happening with Frosted, or maybe if he ends up at Tampa. They have a lot of routes with him. I mean, I thought, for me personally, when he ran in the Remsen, I thought that was far and away his best run to date, and that's what you want to see with these horses. Over the furthest he's ever gone, I thought that was the best run that he's ran to date, and since has been franked by Flexibility. So for me at this point, I would say that, you have to rate him among your top maybe 2 or 3 among the 3-year-olds you're looking at for the Derby. For me right now, he'd be second behind Swipe, but one who could certainly be going places. And I mean, he has everything. He checks all the boxes. I think it's just a matter of if he gets to the race, which is kind of the thing for a lot of these horses. I mean, he's going to get there in points unless something insane happens, but you just hope, soundness, that he stays sound and gets there, as healthy as can be, because you can see right now, even in January, that he's a big chance.
Yeah, I think, people gravitate towards, well-bred horses. I think people like that allure of the undefeated horse. So I think his speed figures stack up better than Nyquist.
Yeah.
So there's a few people that have ranked him better than Nyquist just because of his speed figures.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I just think how you see him how you see him stretch. I mean, he's already proven that he goes over 9. Or it's Nyquist maybe looks a little bit iffy.
Well, he's going to run January 30th in the Holy Bull, and then, Kieran usually likes to, depending on how hard of an effort, he can come back in the Fountain of Youth, or then he can wait till the final prep. He's been on record a couple of times as saying he really prefers the wood. Shadwell loves to run their horses in New York. So yeah. I'm pretty sure he'll be in the wood unless we all of a sudden get one of those, bad winters and he doesn't want to risk, going up to 30-degree temperatures for a day. So I think that would be the only reason why not. Last year it worked out with them for Frosted and some of their other big wins. So I think that makes sense from a strategy standpoint.
It does seem like everybody's going to Florida.
Yeah, Florida, is going to be, well, that's a good bonus. I mean, Nyquist is a perfect example. If you're going to buy a horse and it ends up being good, why run? I mean, that's an extra $1 million plus the purse.
Yes.
So you're running for, an extra $1 million, and why not? I mean, there would be no reason to not go for that $1 million. Basically, it makes the purse the same as the Kentucky Derby. I mean, and only horses that are sold at that sale are eligible for that. So I do think it's a good bonus to have because it does offer those higher price buyers a little bit of an incentive to spend a little bit more money.
I think it definitely does, and it certainly provides for horses like that to travel, which I think is always a good thing. A lot of times that kind of helps to even out these sort of geographical regions we see with the Derby, because you take Nyquist, maybe he shifts over to Florida. Now maybe somebody in Florida's like, whoa, I don't want to run against Nyquist and Mohaymen. They go to Louisiana, and then, the dominoes all fall into place. But I think, so in that sense, it helps kind of spread the wealth a little bit, which provides for better races all around for all of us.
Now, the Sham Stakes, what's going to be kind of your wagering strategy? Wait to see what the track condition is? Do you think this is a playable race as we record on a Wednesday night, or you kind of already thinking, maybe this is more of a watch race?
Oh, for me, it's a very playable race, but you definitely have to wait to see how the track is playing, so I'm going to have to wait on that. But for me, should the track be muddy or sloppy, I'd be looking towards Lauban as a big play in there. If it's dry, I think it's a little bit more of a wide open race, but I'm thinking that we're going to get some rain. So I think I'll be diving in on Lauban in here.
Great. Well, this week we got Santa Anita. Next week we'll be going to the Bayou. They have their first of their 3 big winter cards, and they actually draw for that this Friday, even though the races ain't till the 16th.
Really?
So handicappers should have 7 full days to handicap. I think they have a 14-race card that day. So pack lunch. That's one of those pack lunch ones.
Bring a sandwich to the track.
Yep. We'll have to do we'll probably do a couple of races from there besides the Lecomte. So we'll go to the Bayou next week, and then there isn't much on the 23rd. We'll still pick some races, and then the 30th we've got the Holy Bull. So it picks up really from February on out. That's when the major prep starts. So it should be an exciting run. Season number 3 of Down to the Wire. That's going to do it. Until next week,